China needs a harmonious world. By definition of harmonious, that means we want to make friends with all countries. It's never too late to be our friends. And the reason is we want
Déjà, non, on va manger un peu. L'ordinateur qui a pété les délais. Tout est contrôlé par l'ordinateur. Va manger, va manger.
China needs a harmonious world. By definition of harmonious, that means we want to make friends with all countries. It's never too late to be our friends. And the reason is we want to have a favorable environment for our development, and also we want to bring benefits to the people all over the world. But how can we achieve a harmonious world? According to my paper published in the People's Daily, I think there are 3 points. The first point is we should find the more common things rather than the differences. We should acknowledge there are differences between system, between value, between history, and so on. But what we want is to have co-petition instead of competition, to have consultation instead of confrontation. So we have to look more common things together, like patriotism, human rights, freedom, democracy, and peace and others. And in this basis, we can have a large part of common things and a small part of differences.
Early last year, I published an article in Survival in which I said that there are 4 prevailing visions of world order. And the 4 are, number 1, the Truman 1945 vision. Number 2, what I call the Jiang Zemin, or maybe the Jiang Zemin Hu Jintao vision. Number 3, the neocon vision of world order. And number 4, the Osama bin Laden vision of world order. And of these 4, it's clear that the neocon vision and the Osama bin Laden visions are revisionists. They want to change the world. But what's similar between the 1945 vision and the Jiang Zemin Hu Jintao vision is that they want to keep the current world order. So China is in a very profound way a status quo power. It doesn't want to shake the world. It wants to work with the world as it is. Now, Robert, you asked us here this question. What new responsibilities does China view as key to acting as a global stakeholder? And everyone expects, I guess, at this phase of China's development, for China to play a greater leadership role, to try and change the world. And yet, you notice that China is not doing that. Why? Does it want to be a free rider? The simple answer is that China fears that if it tries to exercise greater leadership in the world order, it will be seen to be threatening. Recently, a leading Chinese official, Cheng wrote an article in which he spoke about the peaceful rise of China. One would think there's nothing to be criticized if you speak about the peaceful rise of China. But I think, as Bob knows, Zheng Bijian was criticized for speaking about the rise of China, because to talk about the rise of China is to talk about a country that might threaten others. So don't speak of rise, speak of peaceful development. So essentially what the current policy of China is, we like the world as it is, we want it to remain as it is, we do not want to shake it, and we will also not exercise any kind of leadership because we do not want anybody to feel threatened.
I was the first American banker with a visa as a banker to visit China in 1975. Mao Zedong was still alive, the Cultural Revolution was still on, and I came away from 3 weeks in China with a vast admiration for the country and its people. There were only 800 million Chinese then. Now there are 1.3 billion, but there are still 800 million Chinese living in the rural areas in not very prosperous conditions. The very high quality leadership of the country recognizes that it has to improve the quality of life of the Chinese people in order to create the internal harmony that is the desire of all Chinese, specifically including the leadership. Now, a reality of China is that it is very, very rich in people and very poor in natural resources. It does not have enough agricultural land to feed itself on a consistent basis. It will have even less agricultural land as more urbanization takes place and farmland has to be given up for housing. It is not sufficiently rich in petroleum or in metal products. So if the leadership of China is going to improve the quality of life of the Chinese people, it must have a peaceful world in which trade can take place. The big competitive advantage of China is its industrious, hardworking people. So they import raw material, they import whole plants from other people, apply their high quality and not very expensive leadership, and then export. That is a model that is working very well for China. It is a model that over time has to be modified. The Chinese economy is simply producing too many exports and not enough material for domestic consumption. And where do we see the perfect description of that problem and the perfect solution to it? In the 5-year plan.
I will argue that China today remains a selective stakeholder in the international system. China has bought into parts of the international order, but has not really fully integrated itself into other parts of the international system. In other words, China remains deeply ambivalent about the current international order. Unlike other rising powers, China does not challenge the current international order. But we have to recognize that China has yet to fully identify itself with the current international order. As long as this ambivalence remains, we're going to see continued friction between China and the current international order. I'm not saying that this is just in the economic area. More importantly, it is in the political arena, because that's where China's frictions with the current international order are the most intense. Why is that the case? I would say before we can answer the question, what kind of world China wants, we have to ask the question, what kind of world, what kind of China wants. Before we can answer that question, it is very hard for China to get the first answer right. I think the Chinese leaders themselves clearly understand that it wants a more prosperous China, and that has to be a China that lives by international rules.
What do Chinese companies want? I think they want innovation. The Chinese market is a very large market. It is also a market with a variety of dynamic changes in customer needs. Being able to innovate to satisfy such customer needs and to create new needs is a key part of corporate core competence. And they need going global. As Robert said, China Mobile set up an international expansion strategy. And recently we acquired a Pakistani company, Paktel. This is the first step for our international strategy. And also, Chinese companies need the quality of management. Faced with the changing competitive and global market environment, Chinese companies must emphasize strategic management and nurture unique corporate culture, elevate leadership ability, and improving the quality of management. All of those are what Chinese companies want. For that, we need a lot of cooperation, international cooperation with outside. And we need the help from R&D institutions. We need investment bank. We need consulting firms. We need lawyers. And we need international talent.
Well, since our core question is what kind of world does China want, I have 4 thoughts to share with you. First, although China's accomplishments are truly extraordinary, it clearly faces staggering internal challenges. And so I think the primary interest of the Chinese leadership is a benign external environment so they can focus on their internal challenges. And you've heard this a little bit from Chairman Cheng's comments and from Kishore. Second point is that I think at the same time, China expects some additional respect and recognition of its interest, because the Chinese are justifiably proud of what they've accomplished, and from their perspective, they are restoring China's place regionally and now globally after a 200-year hiatus. Third, I think, and this is where I shade a little bit beyond where Kishore is, I think there's an increasing recognition in China that it is a rising power and therefore it needs a strategy for deeper international integration. This is clearly what was being introduced by Zhen Bizhen's article about peaceful rise and the discussion about peaceful development. China doesn't want to see itself as threatening the international order.
This conversation today has brought us that little bit closer towards confluence. I think we should be very, very appreciative of panelists who've given both generously of their time and of their ideas.